Good morning. I'm Chris Lee of Southeastern 14, joined by Blake Lovell, also of Southeastern 14. Blake, you had some pretty interesting games last night in the SEC, some not so interesting games last night in the SEC. Let's start with maybe the most interesting, where Alabama hangs on to beat LSU, an LSU team that lost Darius Days to a sprained ankle, still playing without Xavier Pinson, had some foul trouble, I think, to Efton Reed. And I look at Alabama's box score. I'm not quite sure how Alabama won still, other than just hitting a volume of free throws, not necessarily a good percentage. But what were your thoughts on what we saw last night in Tuscaloosa as Alabama snaps a losing streak?
Kind of that. I mean, it's hard to, if you're LSU, it's hard to win without Xavier Pinson or Darius Days. They're already not a good offensive team, as we talked. I mean, they're not a bad offensive team. They're not an elite offensive team. And so when you take those two guys out of the equation, I think it's going to be a struggle. And it was. They just couldn't score enough points. And, Tari Eason basically had to do well, and Brandon Murray, too. They kind of had to do everything and didn't get a whole lot of help beyond that. So I think that was the biggest issue for LSU. Their defense was still there. We keep saying it. It's always going to be there. This is just not a team I think is just going to get run out of the gym by anybody because their defense is too good. But, Jaden Shackelford had the kind of performance you have to have in these games for a team that had lost 3 in a row, and that they had to have this game. We talked about it. I mean, this was a must-win, like to kind of get yourself back to where you want to be. Dropping to 2-4 would have been a pretty bad spot, even though they could have made up for it here in the next week or so. But Alabama's schedule does not get a whole lot easier, and so this was one that they really needed, and they got it. And I think that was pretty much it. I mean, this is just an Alabama team that's not to the level of the one last season, and you're going to have some pretty frustrating moments because of that. And there were plenty of them in this game, but at the end of the day, all that matters is that you win the game, and that's exactly what they did.
Let's talk LSU for a minute, because it sounds like Darius Days, who's probably their best offensive player here, Tari Eason, is going to miss a couple weeks with the sprained ankle. Xavier Pinson was still on the bench with street clothes. LSU, the next few games, Tennessee on the road, Texas A&M at home, 2 not too easy games, TCU away. Then it gets easier with Ole Miss at home, Vandy on the road. I'm not suggesting that LSU is in any sort of tournament trouble because they're 9 in the net this morning, but it's starting to add up a little bit, and I do wonder how those next few games without him might go, he being Darius Days.
Yeah, I don't really think this was that unexpected because, I mean, we brought this up on December the 29th when they played Auburn. They have the toughest first half schedule of anybody in the league, and there are no games against bottom tier teams, like zero. They're playing NCAA tournament teams across the board. Maybe A&M gets there, maybe they don't. But to this point, that's probably what you're looking at. So I think in that scenario, we were going to look at LSU with or without those guys as probably having a hard time of maybe getting that record, to where they were 6-1 or 5-1 or something like that. So yes, now it becomes more challenging without, Darius Days. And I think that's where, it's going to be a challenge. And maybe they do. Maybe they are 3-5 or something like that. So going into that back part. But again, that's where having such a front-loaded schedule, they were playing so well. They've already picked up some of these wins that they need to against Kentucky, Tennessee, Florida, and such. They've kind of put themselves in a spot where even if they lose some of these games, they'll be able to make up for it, I think, in the back half because they've got some teams that are really struggling back there, whether that's, Ole Miss, South Carolina, Missouri, teams like that. So I think LSU's fine. That they did enough work up front that I think that they'll be okay, even if they do, let's say, lose this next game against Tennessee and perhaps even lose that game against Texas A&M. So
yeah, might affect the seeding down the line a little bit, although the committee will look at that and consider that when they seed the field. But
yep.
Kentucky and A&M, not the most fun game to watch, but kind of interesting. I felt like we learned some things about those teams. Kentucky was behind a lot of the night and just kind of willed its way to a win at the end. Not a lot of takeaways from the box score. And I did think from A&M, Henry Coleman III was really good going up against Oscar Tshiebwe. A&M is a kind of a gritty team. I wanted to see them play somebody, right? Because A&M had built this gaudy record without playing a lot of top-tier teams. I think, to me, what we learned about A&M last night, I don't think they can shoot very well. 1 of 22 from 3, took some bad shots. Maybe you do that because you don't want to go up against Sheboygan inside, but Coleman was having a good game. So I don't know. I question some of their offensive strategy, but that's a gritty, athletic team. I think this is the team that's going to end up sneaking in the tournament. I don't know that it's going to get, any better than an 8 or a 9 seed just because I don't know that they can shoot the ball. But what did you take away from this starting with the A&M side?
Yeah, A&M, that was an outlier. They've made 8 or more three-pointers 10 times this season. And so, you think about that in your 15 games leading up to that one, or whatever, not 15 games, what was it, 16 or 17, something like that. They had made, 8 or more threes 10 times. And so I think this was just one of those games where you just don't hit shots. And,
Yeah.
When you're also a team, like that's a bad free throw shooting team. The free throw shooting is by no means a surprise. They're one of the worst in the country. For them to go 5 of 13 from the free throw line, I was not shocked by at all. You've seen them just miss a ton of free throws this year. So I think because of that, you add those two together, you're going to have a hard time winning. But guess what? They only lost by 6. They were just putrid from 3 and the free throw line, and they only lost by 6 to what I think is probably a top 5 team at this point. So, I think if you're A&M, I think there's a lot you can take away from that. You didn't play your best at all. Kentucky didn't play their best, but we kind of thought they wouldn't going into the game. This was a look-ahead game. We mentioned it. Thought it would be an ugly, grinded-out type of win for Kentucky if they were going to get it. I didn't think they were going to come out and just do what they did against Tennessee. It just wasn't going to happen. So I think this game really played out as expected. This was one that, for Kentucky, John Calipari just trying to pull and pull and pull. We need to win this game because I know what everyone's talking about. They're talking about Saturday. And, at the end of the day, they find a way to come back and win it. And those are the kind of games you have to win in that type of style if you want to be a great team. And I think Kentucky, proved that here just by finding a way to win, even though it wasn't their best night. And as we said, it certainly wasn't Texas A&M's best night either. So.
Yeah, I stand corrected. I didn't realize A&M was shooting the 3 that well. It's 35% even after 1 for 22 last night. Andre Gordon is hitting almost half his 3. So if they can shoot the ball a little bit, they're really athletic at guard. They've got some depth. Again, Coleman was so good for them last night going up against maybe the guy that might be the National Player of the Year at this point. I walked away from that thinking A&M is probably a tournament team, and if it can shoot a little bit, I think it almost has to be.
Problem for A&M is their schedule. They got a pretty tough schedule the rest of the way. And, we say this about everyone, but like we mentioned, it kind of flips for some of these teams. And, they played 4 very favorable games up front, and now it's like there's a lot of potential landmines in the way, whether that's, this is where you start playing your LSUs and Tennessees and Auburn and, Alabama and all those teams, Mississippi State. So, yeah, this is where you have to start picking up some of those wins. But I'm encouraged that they'll be able to do that just by how they played and how close they kept this one against Kentucky.
Well, if you're Kentucky, you're encouraged. Not that this team needed a lot of encouragement, but only 8 points from Oscar Tshiebwe, who again got neutralized a good bit by Coleman, only got off 5 shots. I thought Ty Washington played pretty well. The box score didn't really show it, but he's just such a headache with the ball in his hands. But they got stuff from Davian Mintz when Kellen Grady didn't have his best night. And this is just a team that really goes 7 or 8 deep with really good players, and I think that's going a long way for them. They're deeper than that with good players, but I think they're getting stuff out of 7 or 8 guys night in and night out, and I think that's made a difference.
Yep, that's his best teams he's had there. Haven't just been the ones that have relied on the star players. They've had guys come off the bench and make shots and make plays on both sides, and this is one of those teams. They've got it. They've got a lot of things they can do, and they've got a lot of people that can do it. So, yeah, that definitely helps for a team like this.
Does Florida beating Mississippi State in Gainesville without Colin Castleton, who's probably a top 5 player in the league, he's got a shoulder injury, not sure how long he's going to be out. Does that tell us more about Florida or Mississippi State?
I think it tells us more about when you're betting, always bet against the bad news, right? Like anytime there's a drastic change, everyone wants to overcorrect and go in the opposite direction. So, you hear Colin Castleton's not playing, all in on Mississippi State, right? Like it's just a no-brainer. But we've seen this so many times before where, best player doesn't play, last second thing, they still find a way to win. And I think this is what it was. Like, this was just sort of one of those inspired type wins where everyone rallies around that and everyone plays up to where they need to play for them to win. I mean, even someone like, look at someone like a Jason Jatobo, right? Like, he's in there just, I mean, we had 8 points, I think 2 rebounds, but like, he affected the game in a lot of different ways just as someone who was only on the floor for 15, 16 minutes. But like, those are the kind of things that if you watch this game, you had that from everyone. Like, so many different guys stepped up. And I mean, I think it's just one of those games. I think for Mississippi State, you view it as a missed opportunity because, yes, you were playing this team without Colin Castleton, and matchup wise, it was just a much better matchup not having him on the floor. But also, I think you give all the credit to Florida for just having other guys step up. And so I don't really take this as I mean, again, it's disappointing for Mississippi State because you had your opportunity right there to pick up another, sort of signature win. But at the same time, we said going into this, Florida's sitting here potentially staring at a 1-4 hole. Their best players out. You rally everyone. The emotion kind of takes over, the adrenaline, and you just have some of these games. And so I think you give all the credit to Florida. I think they just played a better game, and they had to because this was a must-win game with or without Colin Castleton.
Well, the guy that had a tremendous game for them last night and was really having a great year, or a really good year before this that I don't think we've talked about is Anthony DeRuggi. And last night he really stepped up. He goes for 22 and I guess he only had 3 rebounds, but blocked a shot, had 5 steals. I mean, that kid's had a really nice year, and I don't know that he's gotten a lot of mainstream attention for the season he's had.
Yeah, he's a solid player. It's just, it's hard to, when you have Castleton there doing what he's doing, it's just like, that's where most of the focus is always going to go to. But yeah, I mean, he's a very, athletic, high energy guy that's, I mean, he had to play the type of game he played last night for them to be able to win. So yeah, definitely give him credit too. I mean, it just, I was very impressed with Florida in terms of how they sort of responded to that. And yeah, I think that was, that's a great win just because you are without your best player, and you were 1-3 in the SEC. And as we said, it's just you don't want to put yourself in that position where you're 1-4. That's much harder to dig out of than now you're back at 2-3, and now you get Vanderbilt at home on Saturday, and what's another very winnable game, in that scenario. So you're in a pretty good spot to be able to get back to 500 in the league. So that was a huge step.
Auburn, Georgia. Pretty much exactly what we thought it would be. Auburn wins by 23 and is up 25 at half. Played a lot of guys last night. Walker Kessler was really good again. I don't know that we learned anything here, did we?
No, I mean, look, that's what we said, right? Like, this was what was the spread? Was it like 25 or something? We said, I mean, Georgia's just one of those teams, even though they're not great, but they've kind of kept things at least interesting at times, and they didn't really do that in this one. But this was actually their worst loss of the season by 23. So, yeah, no, I didn't learn anything. I mean, I don't even know what to say. Like, what do you? This is exactly what we thought it would be. Just Auburn doing whatever they wanted, and yeah, I think you're probably more impressed by Auburn doing exactly what they wanted to do, knowing that game at Kentucky is several days away. And Bruce Pearl said it after the game. Just look at the atmosphere there against the Georgia, right? Like that is, I keep saying it, like it's the best atmosphere, and not only in the SEC, but it's one of the best in the country. And if they're rocking that much for Georgia, just wait till Saturday. It's gonna be a pretty unbelievable atmosphere. So yeah, I was impressed that Auburn just came out and that there was no look ahead, there was no lollygagging, there was just full on, we're gonna beat you, and that's what they did.
Speaking of rocking atmospheres, A&M filled the gym last night too.
Yeah, I mean, it's, when Kentucky comes to town, I don't care how good or how bad they are, it's usually a big – and I think A&M, they're another one that's – when you win games, it's so much easier.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just pretty simple. Like, it's – when you win games, a lot easier to get excited. And at that point, they had won 7 in a row, and it's like a lot of good things happening. And I think they'll continue to do that here the rest of the way just because they've got a lot going for them too, so –
Okay, quickly before we end, because you're on a tight schedule today, net rankings this morning, Auburn 5, LSU 9, Kentucky 10, Tennessee 13, Alabama 21, Florida 40. I would say those teams are safe NCAA tournament teams as of today. Then you get to the bubble, where you've got Mississippi State at 52, Arkansas at 55, A&M 56. After that, nobody else is going to make the tournament. Vandy's at 86. Everybody else on the bad side of 100. Any thoughts or takeaways from where the net stands this morning in terms of somebody's in trouble or anything like that stands out? I mean, it's kind of early to be doing this, probably because of, I'm going to say that 2/3 of the games that really matter are still ahead of us. But what are your thoughts after hearing where everyone stands today?
Yeah, I don't have a lot. Like you said, it's pretty clear who has a chance to make the tournament, who doesn't. That's not going to change, I don't think. And it'll just be a matter of seeing how a team like A&M or Mississippi State, even Arkansas, like we said. I mean, Arkansas's net is automatically going to get better in about 3 weeks just because they're going to start playing nothing but good teams. So even if they lose those games, their net will get better. And but you have to win at some point. That's what it comes down to is, your net ranking can say what it says, but at a certain point, you can be higher in the net. But if you don't win games, even if you're playing, strong competition, it's not going to matter. You have to be able to reach that threshold of whatever. You have to be at least 500 in the SEC. I mean, there's no written rule, right, that happens.
Yeah.
But that's what your expectation is. So a lot of that will factor into it. But, yeah, we still got a lot more games to play, and how these schedules kind of set up will be a big part of it. So.
Okay, he's Blake Lovell. I'm Chris Lee. We'll be back with our Friday prediction show for Saturday's games. So be sure to subscribe to our channel, and we hope you'll join us for that.